for more. Joining us is Professor Jamie Pittock. He's from the Fenner School of Environment and Society at the Australian National University. Professor, thank you so much for joining us. Now, first of all, I want to get your reaction, your assessment. Would you say COP15 was a success? And how big a deal is Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework when it comes to tangible measures of progress?
Yes, I think overall this is a good success. It's far from a perfect deal, but the governments have essentially doubled their ambition to protect habitat areas on land with freshwater ecosystem and seas by 2030. So in some ways, this is the Paris conference equivalent from climate being replicated for biodiversity conservation. So that's really pleasing, but we could do better.
And one big sticking point was over how to fund conservation efforts, particularly in parts of the world that hold some of the world's most outstanding biodiversity. How is that being addressed? The devil will be in the details, but we seem short of that so far.
Indeed, the developed countries have only promised to provide around $30 billion a year to help developing countries conserve important ecosystems when what's really needed is an order of magnitude more funding. There are existing mechanisms such as the Global Biodiversity Facility that the World Bank oversees. So there's the mechanisms to do it. We really need developed countries to be more generous. One of the positive things from this conference was an alignment of the climate change and biodiversity conservation agendas. If humanity stops destroying so many ecosystems, it will keep a lot of carbon locked up in vegetation and in the ground. And so that might be one way in which greater finance can be provided to conserve biodiversity and reduce the amount of climate change pollution.
Professor, how confident are you that this global deal will stand? And given previously set targets to combat biodiversity loss at COP10 in 2010 failed to achieve even a single one of the aims by 2020 deadline. And how can we make sure we don't repeat what happened more than a decade ago?
Yes, the previous 20 targets were not achieved. And so there's an obvious question, will the 23 new ones be achieved? Having said that, there was a lot of progress. So, for example, the area of land-based habitats protected increased to 15% of the planet's area, and the target was 17%. So got close. And so I would be hopeful that with the added urgency to conserve biodiversity, with the co-benefits in reducing greenhouse gas pollution, with the greater cooperation that we're now seeing between China, who held the presidency for this conference, and developed countries, I'm hopeful that we will make a lot of progress between now and 2030.
As you mentioned, China presided over the summit alongside the host country Canada, which stepped in at the last minute due to COVID restrictions in China. How key is China's role, not just in getting the deal done, but protecting the planet?
Well, China's role is critical. In some ways, they've been a bit of a bridge builder between developing and developed nations here. It's notable that in the presidency of this conference, China collaborated with a number of Western governments where they've been in dispute. And China, of course, as one of the world's largest economies, has a key role in adopting more sustainable practices in its manufacturing, in energy supply, that will go a long way towards conserving biodiversity. China can really set the global example for those countries with emerging economies that will be crucial if we are to both conserve our flora and fauna and reduce climate change by the middle of this century.
Professor, looking ahead, what can we expect from COP16? What do you wish to see?
Well, certainly at COP16, it would be useful to revisit the question of how to finance the targets that have been adopted this week. And a number of the targets have some ambiguous wording. So some of the measures that have been proposed to do things like reduce pollution, to reduce to sustainable levels consumptions of natural resources, to protect threatened species. It would be good to see next year's conference look at how to tighten up the wording and be more precise about what the governments need to achieve.
And before we
One
get
other
to...
point.
Sorry to continue.
To achieve each of these targets, it needs a national plan, and we need to see those national plans.
Is that what we should be looking out for next then, before we get to COP16 going forward? What will sort of tell us that we've been set up on a positive course following this round of meetings?
So under the Convention on Biological Diversity, each of the 196 member national governments has to prepare a national biodiversity plan. That's where the rubber hits the road. And so it would be good to see by the next Conference of Parties, most of those governments having updated their plans to show precisely what they're promising to do so they can be held accountable. And in the case of the developing countries, so that financiers can see what they could help implement.
All right, Professor, thank you very much for your time and your expertise this morning. Professor Jamie Pittock from the Fenner School of Environment and Society at the Australian National University.